Dear students, welcome to the UGC EPG Pathashala on Human Rights and Duties. My name is Professor YSR Murthy. I am the Executive Director for the Center for Human Rights Studies, OP Jindal Global University. In the paper on Philosophical Foundations of Human Rights, Sources of Human Rights, today we will take up the module on French Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizens. Before we go to this particular subject, let us briefly review what we had covered in the past few modules. We traced the evolution of human rights from ancient times till 1689. In particular, we saw the notions of human rights in the Vedic period, the Hammurabi Code, the Cyrus Cylinder. Then we also examined the rock edicts of Ashoka and the significance of the Magna Carta that was adopted in the year 1215, that was signed in the year 1215, and the Dutch Declaration of Independence and the England Bill of Rights, the Glorious Revolution, and the American War of Independence and the American Declaration of Independence. Like each event was shaped by the historic, social, economic, cultural, religious, and other conditions. And it was a struggle against tyranny, against authoritarianism, against colonialism, against subjugation, against discrimination, against a variety of injustices. And these struggles shaped human rights, their development, their evolution. In fact, the modern instruments we have today, which were adopted in the 20th century, many of them, or the provisions in many of these instruments can be directly traced back to these milestones which we had earlier discussed. And today, let's look at another significant milestone or a watershed event in the evolution of human rights since times immemorial, and what was the historical context behind this French Revolution? What were the factors which were responsible for the adoption of the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizens, and what is its significance? This is the subject matter of today's module. What are the learning objectives? At the end of this module, all students will have an insight into the contribution and implication of the French Declaration. You will also appreciate the impact on the movement of shaping the idea of human rights. The French Declaration is regarded among the most important events in the history of human rights for its enormous contribution in the development of human rights. It impacted almost every modern constitution across the globe. It was inspired by the American Declaration of Independence. It gave inspiration for the French Revolution. This French Declaration served as a foundation to the French Constitution that was adopted in the year 1791. It reflects the outrage of the National Assembly, which expressed its anguish against the terrible state of affairs in the France at that point of time. On August 26, 1789, the National Assembly adopted the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. It turned out to be the greatest legacy of the revolution and became a cornerstone of all the constitutional documents in the French history. Its foundations are rooted in the enlightened political thought that was embraced by many European thinkers. This document was drafted in consultation with American leaders like Thomas Jefferson. The principal thoughts advocated in the document are equality, liberty, and fraternity. It also incorporated all the ideals like equality and the concept of inalienable rights to address the discrepancies of the old regime. It aspired to establish the principles of an ideal democracy in the French society. What is the historical background to this declaration? In fact, this declaration is the fountainhead of the spirit behind the French Revolution. The objective is to earn the right to determine one's own future and restructure their political system. And the root causes of this declaration and the revolution were basically financial. The king had heavily invested in the American Revolution, which brought the French economy on the brink of bankruptcy. This financial crisis was compounded by the extravagant expenses of the royal couple and the droughts which affected the country for several decades. The crippled economy, coupled with the tyrannical rule of King Louis XVI, led to this declaration. People were terribly upset with the financial reform packages that was proposed by the Comptroller General of the King. It proposed a universal land tax which was required to be paid by the privileged classes like clergy and nobles. The king invited the Estates General, an assembly of French clergy, nobles and middle classes, to invite the opinion of the privileged classes. And it was decided to abolish the privileges of the aristocratic classes, including the clergy and the nobles. The demands of a fiscally responsible government and a fair judicial system were sought. And these demands of the third estate, that's basically commoners, were fiercely contested by the first two estates, clergy and nobles, who were not prepared to give up their privileges. And in fact, an environment of hostility had developed between the three estates. The third estate, basically the commoners, met and they resolved to bring constitutional reforms in the system. And they have formed a National Assembly to articulate its aspirations in the document which is now known as the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizens. What are its principles? 1. Representatives of the French people organized as a National Assembly, and they asserted that ignorance, neglect, or contempt of the rights of man are the sole cause of public calamities. And the declaration is divided into several rights. It proclaims that men are born and remain free and equal in rights. The aim of all political association is the preservation of the natural and imprescriptible rights of man. The principle of all sovereignty resides essentially in the nation. It goes on to say liberty consists in the freedom to do everything. Law is the expression of general will. The declaration also says no person shall be accused, arrested, or imprisoned except in the cases and according to the forms prescribed by law. The law shall provide for such punishments only, and no one shall suffer punishment except it to be legally inflicted in virtue of a law passed and promulgated. All persons are held innocent until deemed guilty. If arrest of accused is indispensable, all harshness not essential to the securing of the prisoner's person shall be severely repressed by law. No one shall be disquieted on account of his opinions, including his religious views, but does not disturb the public order. It goes on to say that free communication of ideas and opinions is the most precious of the rights of man. The security of the rights requires public military forces, and the common contribution is essential for the maintenance of the forces and cost of administration, and it should be equitably distributed in proportion to means. The French Declaration says citizens have a right to decide, and the society has the right to require of every public agent in which the observance of the law is not assured, nor the separation of powers defined has no constitutional at all. Since property is an inviolable and sacred right, no one shall be deprived thereof except where public necessity, legally determined, shall clearly demand it. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen asserts equality, liberty, and fraternity. As I said before, it proclaims separation of powers, the will of majority, and natural rights. Equality and liberty and fraternity. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen is different from the American Declaration because it does not mention any particular regime responsible for the corruption in the society. American one blamed the UK British colonial masters. The society which does not embrace the principles of equality, liberty, and fraternity is bound to become corrupt, and no modern nation, the Declaration said, can survive the test of time without acknowledging and protecting the principles. The principle of liberty was especially articulated in a unique manner, appreciating the limits of the freedom that can be protected. Now, let us turn our attention to natural rights. What are these natural rights? It's an essential and a necessary setup for a democracy and cannot be taken away by any government. In fact, the theory of natural rights was an important subject of debate among the scholars of the 18th century. The French Declaration on the Rights of Man and Citizen also upheld the separation of powers. The idea of a government was structured in a way that all the branches of the government were independent of each other and thereby could act as a check on each other. The will of majority. It ensures that French government was a democratically elected government which enjoyed the confidence of the people. It empowered the citizens with a right to participate in the election of their government. It not only meant for the French society, but also for each and every nation which had chosen democracy. Now, let's focus our attention on the rule of law. There was an absence of this principle in the earlier regimes. The privileged classes like the clergy, the nobles in the erstwhile French democracy were given many entitlements in the power structure, which led to an abuse of the process of justice. It was important to establish a mechanism for the protection of human rights. What is the significance of this French Declaration on the Rights of Man and Citizen? It is a reflection of spirit of democracy which had started becoming a movement after the American Declaration. It articulated the principles of human rights. It is regarded among the most important milestones in the development of human rights. It laid down several principles, including the rule of law, which are the bedrock of any modern constitutional democracy. It clearly described the principle in great detail. It was a way of asserting the idea behind the French Revolution. It sought to create a system where there was no individual above the rule of law, which respected the rights of the citizens. In conclusion, we have learned the significance of the Declaration of Rights of Man and the Citizen in the evolution of human rights in modern jurisprudence. The principles clearly establish the importance of the ideals which the human society should aspire to achieve and accomplish. This declaration is a testimony to the influence of the American Declaration on the democratic struggles around the world. Now, let me take up the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted by the UN General Assembly in the year 1948. In the very first article, it says all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. This is a collective common consensus that was adopted by all the countries which are part of the UN General Assembly. And where did this come from? You can see at once, or you can at once trace it back to the French Declaration on the Rights of Man and Citizen, which echoed or which started the very same idea that all men are born free and equal in rights. And if you look at the UDHR and the subsequent international covenants which were adopted by the United Nations General Assembly in the 20th century, many of them echo the principles that were adopted in the French Declaration on the Rights of Man and Citizen, and they talk about natural rights, they talk about many other things. And in short, there was a historical context, there was tyranny, there was in the drought, there were excessive taxation, and there was severe oppression, and which was coupled with extravagant expenses by the royal couple, and all this led to a churning, it led to a revolution, it led to the overthrow of the tyrannical regime, it led to the assertion of the rights of man and citizen in the shape of a French Declaration. And this French Declaration inspired many other developments in Europe and rest of the world. Thank you.